All right, welcome back. In this particular session, we are going to be starting up on exercise 2 and looking at the tools and operations inside of Illustrator. So in these particular collection of videos that you'll be watching, we're going to be looking at the tools for creating imagery, working with color, as well as working with how to trace and import outside vector, or rather outside pixel-based imagery, and how you can use that inside of a vector editing program or illustration program. So for this video, we'll specifically be starting off with the drawing tools. So we're going to take a look at a collection of those. We won't look at all of them because there are far too many to cover for a session like this. You are welcome to explore the additional tools that are in here, but I will show you just a few of the key tools to get you started so that you can really start making anything right away. Let's get started. Alright, so the first thing I need to do is I'm going to go ahead and reopen my project file that I ended with from the last time. So I'm just going to go and navigate to it since I know where it is. And it's in my Project 2 folder, under my edits, and there it is. Just double click that and open it up. All right, so now that we've got our project back up, what we're going to be doing for this particular session is again sort of showing you examples of how to work with the drawing tools and getting kick-started with starting to draw and trace and create outlines of your existing imagery inside of your design. So it's important that we work from our reference imagery that we've already established to kind of give us a starting place. Now, most of what I showed you in the last part of this project was really preliminary stuff that any designer has to go through in order to get their pitch for their idea accepted, is to show that they can wireframe out the idea really well to give a good solid mock-up of where you're going with your idea. And it's also a good starting place so that you can keep track of things before you get started on the bigger pieces of the project. Now remember, the placeholders and things that we generated from the last exercise, we may not even revisit at this point because we know what we're working from. But again, they stand as a good exercise for understanding how to block out space inside of your design to see where you need to be moving. So today, we'll start tracing out elements. So let's go ahead and look at the drawing tools on our toolbar. So let's go over here to the left side of the screen. And we're going to be looking in this video in this little bracket of tools right in here. And again, I'm only going to cover a handful of these. So we're going to start off with the very best tool that is in the palette here called the pen tool. Now, I briefly introduced that to you in the last exercise, but we're going to go into it more in depth in this exercise. So let's go ahead and turn on the pen tool. It's this funky looking little sort of classic ink pen head icon. Click on that. You can also notice that the tooltip that pops up on screen in the yellow box tells you the shortcut key after the name. So it'll tell you P in the parentheses. So that means that you can hit the letter P on your keyboard to activate that tool at any time. All right. So now that we have the tool out, notice that the icon for it, or cursor, looks much like a pen cap or an old classic ink pen. And this is an interesting tool. Most people make a big mistake with this tool in thinking that you can just click and drag all over the screen like you can with a pencil or with a brush. And that's just not the case with this tool. It's very misunderstood in that sense. And even for me, the first time that I learned how to use it. So, to pass on a little bit of wisdom here, you want to make sure that when you're using this tool, think of it as a click and release and move to drop lines across the screen. So we'll start basic. Let's start by adding, we're going to draw out the circular form for the mouth. So we'll start with that. So I'm going to start with the lips here. And notice that as I wave my mouse over screen that all these little extra layers pop up from my placeholders. If you don't want to see those right now, come over to your layer panel over here on the right side of the screen. If you don't see it, it should be in the lower list on your screen for your panels that are listed. But you want to go to Layers, and you want to find that layer we created called Placeholders. Now, my computer is kind of having a little bit of overload problem there, so sorry about that. But we want to find our main layer that contains all of our placeholders inside. So there it is right there. It says placeholders. Now I can just click the eye for that and turn them off, and now I can move on and start working. Alright. So now that I've turned that layer off, I do need a place to start drawing new graphics though. So what I'm going to do is create a brand new layer, and I'm going to put inside here. We'll start off by actually, again, whenever you're starting with making new layers, they need to have purpose so that whatever you create inside of them has reason and has order, and you can navigate to it quickly. So we're going to call this section the mouth, is what we're going to start in. So let's go ahead and start by drawing out the mouth. So I'm just going to change the name of that layer to mouth, target it so that I can draw inside of it by clicking the little circle here. That will target it so that if I draw anything, it will appear in this layer only. Alright, let's come out here to our workspace and make sure you have your image centered on screen. And we're going to start off by drawing around the outer lip of this face. So I'm just going to kind of draw a rough shape to get it started. So I'm just going to click once. Notice I clicked once right there where I clicked, and it drops a point on screen. Now when I move my mouse, notice how it gives me this little reference green line. What that's telling us on screen is that the next time when you click again, there's going to be a line created between this point where you clicked and the original point where you started. So it's essentially like a click and release to drop lines on screen that are interconnected. So that's how this tool works. It is not a click and drag tool per se, but let's start by just clicking and dropping lines. So we dropped our first point, so I'm going to move over, drop another, and continue to do that. Now notice as I get going, look what's happening behind me. It is automatically applying a color fill to wherever I'm drawing my imagery right now. Now it's not bad right now. I will show you how we can turn that off in just a moment so that that doesn't happen again when you draw a new image. But let's go ahead and go around here. So notice that as you click your mouse and release it in order to drop new points, and a line will automatically be connected between the last point that you dropped and the new one you drop. Now they're all straight. Notice how each line connection has a straight line connected. That is a typical appearance option for the pen tool when it generates new lines. Now if you don't like that, like if you're not drawing around a geometric shape, you may want to draw rounded lines as you go, and that's pretty easy to do. The pen tool also gives you the option to click and drag with the mouse after you've made your first point. So we're pretty far in now, and we already have a point behind us. So if I click and drag my mouse on a point right here, if I click and drag it, notice that there's a green bow line behind me. That bowing line is what I can use to round off my, my line that I'm creating, or line segment, or path is another word they like to use for it whenever you're drawing with vectors. So that's just from clicking and dragging a new point on screen. And when you click and drag, it pulls out these long green handles from your pinpoint so that you can see on screen how to control the incoming line and whether or not it comes in straight or it comes in at an angle. So I'm going to just let that one be a little bit of an angle for now. And then I'm going to come over here. If I click again, by the way, it will try, usually the second line it generates, it will try to round off. If you round it off this one, it'll mirror it. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's annoying. But anyway, now we're going to round it off to follow this area. And here's a good rule of thumb when trying to figure out where do I arc, or do I just kind of add like 1,000 little pinpoints in between. A good rule of thumb is when guiding your way around an arc, try to find a halfway point between two arc edges, or about a 45-degree angle of difference from the part you're moving to another. So it'd be like if you were drawing a circle around a perfect circle, you would probably only need 4 pinpoints to make it finished, and you could just round off each pinpoint a little bit and it would be perfect. So I'm just going to go about this far around this curved edge here and then drag out And notice how I can get that pinpoint to round off that line to be not too bad. Now see how it does this after I let go? It automatically is ready to drop another rounded line. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring it up a little bit, let it go. And I'm going to go ahead and I think that I can actually probably round this whole thing off because the rounding, the half circular form that's between here and here it's kind of equal, so we're doing pretty good. So we're going to go ahead and close our shape. This is important. Always close your shape if you're wanting to make like a perfect shape that has an outline around it. Illustrator does allow you to draw incomplete shapes, by the way. If you don't like what you've been drawing, you can hit the delete key to get rid of pins and points. You can always use Command Z, of course, to go back if you don't like what you've done, or undo, or redo. Another neat feature is that if you accidentally go away from this drawing, just by going back to the pen tool, you can't just start drawing new lines. It won't start with a reconnection. It'll start assuming you want to start a new drawing, which if you remember from our Illustrator previous demo exercise, that every time you draw something new, a new layer is designated on screen. Well, with this layer currently active and it's selected, I can go back to my pen tool and I can actually complete the work I started by clicking, by moving my mouse over one of the endpoints. And notice as I move the tip of this little pen tool over an endpoint that the little star next to my pen changes to a little line segment. So what that tells us, or what Photoshop is trying to tell us, is that if you click here, you can restart the line connection so that you can continue drawing on this exact same shape. So I'm going to do that. I click here, and now it's got a new line, and I'm going to go ahead and go to my beginning point so I can close it. So notice as I move the pen over the original point, it shows a little circle to close it. Click, and now I've closed it. Now, I forgot to arc it while I was doing that. Oops. Not a big deal. Actually pretty easy to fix. This gives us the opportunity, of course, to look at a separate pen tool to make this functionally work better. So let's go back to our toolbar and click and hold on the pen tool this time. And you should see three other tools listed beneath the pen tool. We have the basic one, pen tool. We have add anchor point. So that actually, if you go to that, it'll show a plus sign next to your pen. And you can move along any line segment drawing that you have on screen, and you can actually click along the line to add new control points. So what the benefit of that tool is that it allows you to add more line detail. If you need to add more bumps or curves along a surface, you're going to need more points to do that. Likewise, if you go back to your pen tools on the left here, you also have delete anchor point. Delete anchor point is good for simplifying a shape, like if it has too many pinpoints on it, which can also bog down the processing of your file or your document inside of Illustrator. You can use this tool to remove points, but it also helps in cleaning up a drawing if it has too many points around it that you don't need. So I can actually release that point from the line by just moving my mouse over it to erase it. Pretty cool. The last one in the list here is called the anchor point tool. You pull that out, it looks like a little acute triangle edge. And this one, if you move it along a line between 2 points, it will show you a black arrow with an arc. Now if I click and drag on that, notice what happens. It will pull out a perfect arc, or an arc shape, based on where you clicked, that you can stretch out and move the line form accordingly. Pretty nifty. So that means I can do that on any one of these little lines that I've started with along my shape here. So I can take any of my lines and I can kind of round them off if I want to. Pretty cool. Now another use for this tool is that it also allows you to click on previously dropped anchor pinpoints. So you can click on them to select them and drag to pull out the anchor control handles so that you can actually further manipulate the incoming line on that anchor point. So if I want to, let's say I want there to be an arc on one side of this anchor point and I want a straight line on the other. So right now what it's giving me is kind of a reciprocal change. If I drag on the handle, then both sides change in some way and they're rounded. But if I grab, after I pull out the handle, I can then grab the tip and I can break the handle in half and only change one side of it. Pretty nifty, huh? Or I can click on it to reactivate it as a corner point. So it really just depends on what you're looking for or what you're trying to do. The pen tool is the strongest tool in any digital design package that you find on the market. You will find it actually in just about, I think, every type of digital editing software will have some version of this tool available. So we can thank the people of Adobe for adapting this out so much. So it's a great, strong tool for working with, and you can get lots of custom shapes very, very quickly with it. Another interesting thing to know about when working with pathways when you're drawing on screen, once you've drawn a path, you can actually come back and pull and manipulate the position of your anchor points when you're done. So to do that, come up here to your toolbar and use the white arrow tool. It's called the direct selection. So you can hit A on your keyboard to turn it on. And you can go back and click on one of your anchor points on screen to activate that anchor point. Notice how it pops out the little handles connected to that point, if there are any. And then you can also click and drag on that main anchor point to reposition it on your screen for your object. You can also click on the anchor handles to drag the handles around again. It will pull them both at the same time, but you can stretch one independent of the other. Pretty nifty. Now that's everything with the basic pen tool. Again, that is the most basic tool that I will ever introduce to anyone when working with illustrating in a digital world. This is the strongest tool for doing that with. Now we started with it by doing it with this area, and we designed the outer rim of the mouth. Now we can't see through the mouth to the rest of the lips, so we might need to make some adjustments here in a minute. So now what we're going to do is draw the base of the screen down here for the stand for the monitor. So we're going to use the pen tool to do that as well. So let's come down here, and we're going to use these two corners right here that are the intersection lines for our grid that's on screen. And we're going to use that as where the monitor, the point of the monitor comes up to the back edge of the screen. And then we'll have the base stand of the monitor go all the way down to this blue line and this one over here. So let's go ahead and start with a corner line right there. And remember, if we click and drag on our second point, it will arc the line. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to move my pen right about here, close to the bottom of the screen, and click and arc my line. And then I'm going to create another line. Now it's automatically going to arc the second one, so remember you can always come back and correct it though. Alright, click there, click there, click there, and then I'm going to click and drag this line so that again I get an arc. And I'm going to actually drag right along my grid line so that I get a nice 45-degree angle. And then I'm going to finish off by connecting where I started. Now, the line looks pretty sloppy right now. Remember, we can clean that up though with our pen tool. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to start by going with my anchor point tool, and I'm going to start with the first point right here. And I straighten it out by just clicking on it, which is okay, but the truth is what I need to do is, after straightening it, then I need to take that line and pull it down like that. And I'm going to straighten off this line right here, and then we're going to take it from right here, whoops, just to pull out one of these anchors. And again, we're going to bring that line into submission to this tool so that we have two nice arcs. Now these aren't perfect. Obviously, if you see on screen, our grids are not spaced evenly right now. Now remember, you can always change the position of your reference guides by clicking and dragging on them if you ever need to. But that's a good starting place. All right. So now we've established these two parts of it. And that's how we can work with the pen tools. Now we can keep working around with the pen tools from here. I'm going to actually turn part of this off, and notice that I started drawing the mouth and then I went ahead and drew the base, and it all ended up inside the same layer. Oops. So I need to separate those real quick. So I'm going to make another new layer, and we'll call this the computer. And I'm going to drag this pathway that looks like the base and drop it into the computer layer. That way they're separated now. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off the mouth imagery for a minute so I can see through to the layer below, or the original image. And what we're going to do is actually turn off the individual pathway. Don't turn the whole layer off, then you can't draw on it anymore. So I'm just going to make sure that the main layer is still turned on for mouth, and I'm going to draw the inner lip this time. And I'm just going to do it really quick, nothing real fancy right now, but just something to get started with. So again, I'm drawing, and I'm going to kind of create arcs along the way. And I'm just sort of taking my time, which is the whole idea when working with tools like this, is remembering to take your time. You don't want to rush it because you could cause things to look really bad really quickly if you're not careful. And again, if you get spots where you don't like what you've done, just switch your pen tools around. And I might even go to my direct select tool here, move that around. And just to get started with that part, now that I've drawn that part of the mouth, I'm going to go ahead and turn that layer off too. And now I'm going to draw the teeth. Sometimes it's good to draw, when you have layers that are near each other, it's good to draw the layers that are going to go underneath them. Like if you're going to stack them up, it's important that you give yourself a little leeway to work so that you can slide layers around. So I like to draw, if I'm going to draw lips, I know the teeth go behind the lips, so I'm going to make the teeth layer drawing a little bit bigger so I can layer it right behind it. So this is just going to be like a quick kind of sketch around the teeth here, nothing real fancy. I'm going to go beyond the boundary of the lips a little bit to get it started too. And then I'm going to do the same down here with the teeth. Now you can get as detailed as you want to with this part of the process. It is totally up to you how much detail you want to put into this. Again, what I'm doing right now is I am just making quick edits to the teeth on screen. I'm not doing anything super fancy, just making general line forms on screen for the teeth. I might even rename some of these layers as I go, like this particular layer that I'm working with, these are the top teeth, so where it says path, I'm going to call it top teeth, and then the lower teeth. That way I know what these two layers are when I come back to them. Alright, so we've established that part. We also want an area to fill in behind the empty spot of the mouth because Illustrator does not make automatic fill color areas. So I'm just going to draw a shape that fills in that area. And again, I'm going to make it a little bigger than my teeth and lips so that it's well covered and I don't miss anything on accident. We'll just make that, we'll call it inside of mouth. Most likely I will make that like black or something to sort of fill it in to make it easy. Alright, so now that we have all those pieces, I'm going to go ahead and turn, I'm going to make sure to turn them off for now. And now we want to go back into our computer layer that I have right here, and we need to draw the screen itself. So we're going to move on from the pen tool for this part, and I want to show you another set of tools that are in here for drawing called the shape tools. Your shape tools, if you look down here on your list, there are a collection of shapes listed under something called the rectangle tool. These are great tools, lots of standard shapes for you to get started with. So we're going to work with the basic rectangle, and we're going to use it to make the outer screen. So I'm going to use my grid on screen, my guides, as a guideline, and just click on the outside square and go all the way and drag out. Notice that shape tools are click and drag shapes, by the way. As I click, it will drag out on screen to show me a reference outline of what the shape is going to look like when I release the mouse. So I'm going to release it right now. and it automatically drops a white square on screen to let me know here's your new shape. So there it is right there, rectangle. I'm going to turn that layer off, and I'm going to now draw the inner rectangle. So I'm going to pick the inner line here that makes the inner part of the screen so that I have a frame to work with. And I'm just going to draw another simple rectangle for that area as well. The cool thing about the rectangle tool is that it gives you, any of the shape tools give you control handles around the edges of the shape after you're done drawing it, so you can transform it. It also gives you these little interior circle controls, and these allow you to manipulate the final form of the square or rectangle. So I can actually round off my corners to make it look like a more rounded edge screen, kind of like a Mac. So I'm going to leave it like that to be able to make that possible. And I'm going to turn that layer off as well. Alright, so now we have our 3 parts to our computer screen. We also need a background. Let's not forget the background. So we'll go ahead and keep drawing inside this layer, so I'm just going to reactivate it. And I'm going to draw one main layer background. And you know what? So that I'm not activating everything on this layer. Zoom in just a little bit. See, this is where sometimes it's difficult to navigate because they have all these little pop-up tools on screen, so you don't quite know what you're supposed to do. I still want this to be my target layer, but what I need to do is I'm going to add an empty sublayer to it. So I'm going to come down here on my layer panel with my computer layer active, and I'm going to click on this option for New Sublayer, and I'm going to highlight that layer so that I can draw inside of it. Now I'm going to draw about halfway in between this outer frame area of my screen to establish the color fill that I want to use, or shape fill that I want to use for the back of the screen. I'm going to rename that layer too. Call it Screen Background. Alright, so there it is listed right there. So it's a screen background is what it gave me. Alright. Now we got that. All right, let's turn that layer off. Okay. So again, like that's just one of the shape tools. There are many here, of course. You have the rounded rectangle, which is, it starts you with a basic rectangle that's already got rounded corners. But again, you can manipulate these to make it more round like a pill, or push them all the way out to make a perfect angular form. All depending on what your end use of the tool is, of course. But there are many tools here that can do those types of things. Even specialty shapes like the star tool, which is a multi-pointed edged shape, or the solar flare, which I don't really recommend. Again, that's a special use for significant situations only. So again, those are some of your basic drawing tools. There are other fun ones to work with in here, like the line segment tools are very interesting. They make your basic line segment forms on screen. So if you need a very simple line, these are great for that. One thing you may want to know this, like that's kind of a fun extra when working with the line segment tool. I'll just show you over here for fun. Is that you can actually create shapes without that you can create shapes and make them very sort of repetitive in form and position on screen. So you can create kind of generative looking drawings. So what does that really look like? So let me get out the line segment. And normally when you draw with these, they don't always have a color assigned. So we're just going to quickly assign a color before we start drawing. So look up here at the top. With the tool active, it says no selection, that's fine. What we're going to do is use one of these two boxes up here to change the color of this object. Now, the first box changes your fill color for an object, and the other one changes your stroke. Now, I'll talk more about this in a separate video, but for now, let's use this second box to change the line color. We're just going to use black. And I'm going to click once on screen to draw a line, so you can see there's a line segment. Now, if I hold down some keys to do this, like there's a key called the tilde key. If you're looking at your keyboard, it's actually It's actually the key that looks like a squiggly line directly below escape. If you hold that down and click and drag with your mouse, it will draw an infinite number of lines out from the point that you started with, and it will continue to draw new lines on screen every time you move your mouse around. So basically what it's doing is it's recording your mouse movements with the drawing tool you have active. This works great with any of the line segments and any of the shape tools. And these are all considered parametric drawing tools, so they have settings or parameters to them to make the shape automatically. This will not work with the pen tool or any of the other drawing tools, just so you're aware. So you can get some very unique effects very quickly with this tool. You can also do combinations, like if you hold down the tilde key and you hold down things like the option key at the same time, it'll draw different ways, like a spirograph almost. I think you can also do this and shift. Yeah, you can hold down the shift key as well. So just getting some interesting things on screen. Now I'm going to delete all this because it's taking up screen space right now. But just so you know that you can create interesting shapes very quickly just by using a couple little keystrokes as well. All right. Now the other tool that you should probably be aware of are your other drawing tools, like your paintbrush and your pencil tool. These both can do drawing inside of Illustrator, and they both do more freeform drawings, so you can click and drag with them to make shapes of any kind. Pencils will make a single thin stroke line, and brushes will allow you to apply a texture form to the entire brush line so that it looks like a simulated shape or a brush texture, or actually any number of types of different sort of design ornamented forms that fit along this line. So it can be a very powerful tool. As far as the other options you should look at or know about when working with the drawing tools inside of Illustrator, there are tool options. So if you select one of your drawn images on screen, you can actually change their appearance on screen as well. And those are all listed up here across the top of your tool options bar. So you can find everything from changing what's called the stroke weight or stroke thickness. That's this line that you see on screen. That's considered a stroke line. You can change its weight by changing its point value to make it thick or to make it really thin or invisible. You also have options for changing the appearance of that line on screen, the shape that's used or applied to it. Again, this is something you can do with a paintbrush line. You can also do the same with the pencil. The pencil line also acts much the same way as the paintbrush does. So these are great tools to know how to use, and it's good to know where those options are across the top of the screen when working with a shape that you've already drawn. You can change up its appearance very quickly with those tools. Okay, now I'm going to turn my layers back on, not my placeholders, but the stuff that I've drawn. I'm going to turn all of those bits and pieces back up so that I can see them. My computer layer, the main layer, should be below the mouth, so I'm just going to click and drag that and drop it below so I can see my mouth on top. I'm going to go into my mouth layer and expand it. And I'm going to make sure I can see all the pieces to the mouth. So I'm going to bring the teeth, make sure that they are appearing above the inside of the mouth, so the inside should actually go at the bottom of this layer stack. And then the lips should go above, relatively above the teeth. There are still some options that we'll need to change or manipulate that I will show you in the next part of this exercise as far as working with drawing tools inside of Illustrator. But this is a good starting place for seeing how the shapes work together at this point in the design process. Another great tool you can use for changing up whenever you've been drawing is you can also use the eraser tool here, which does a great job at making cutaways inside of your shape or form. If you don't have a specific form highlighted on screen. Now I recommend if you're going to cut into something, have it highlighted first and then draw into it. That way it only affects those drawing layers. So see, as I use the eraser on a vector, it erases a vector line through all the shapes. Notice that? So it's a very unique tool in that it almost kind of looks like it's drawing its way through a shape, but it's making a hole or a cutaway inside of it. So it's an interesting tool to try to use for carving away pieces of a design element on screen. So let's say I want to carve into this, I could use my eraser and just cut off the edge there. And maybe even cut off that part. Maybe even round it off more. So see how it works is it works very clearly to be able to do that very quickly and very easily. Now if you miss a piece and you carve into it like this, you'll make two separate pieces. So you have to be kind of careful. You'll start making separate objects all over screen. But that's how the eraser inside of a vector program works. It doesn't just leave a dead area. You can edit any line you see on screen because of the vector, the nature of vector software. Okay, so I think that'll conclude the first part of this in terms of looking at the drawing tools in general and how to make use of them on screen. Next time we'll look at how to activate the coloring tools and different ways that you can manipulate color on screen. Take care.